Okay, hello. Let's get started. Um, so I think what is Gen AI? I think everybody might be knowing by this time what is Gen AI is, right? It is something. It is an artificial intelligence that creates new content such as like text, audio, images, videos by learning from the pattern from the existing data, right? And it will generate the output. But it was there since beginning, right? Like it was there since a while. Remember Google translation? It generated language from one to another one, translated. So it was there. Then what is that? What is the so much fuss about generative AI, right? Like how it started. So there was this breakthrough which happened because of this paper, which is attention is all you need. That paper introduced a transformer model, which introduced like self-attention mechanism to train the model so that you can train your model with more capabilities it has today. And of course, there was this all other things which led to development of these large language model, right? And today we see that it performs so many tasks. A single model can perform so many tasks. And we always hear this term, which is like the larger the parameter, like 1 trillion parameter, GPT-4 has been trained. So we hear these parameter like terms, right? So the larger the model is, the more the parameters are, the better it is. So the larger is better in this case. Even though we develop like generic model, right, there was need of developing specific purpose model as well. And what you do in specific purpose model, you take the domain context that you want to build with, and you take the base model and you add it on top of that, and you train the model again. The technique we've been talking about, it's fine tuning. And with that technique, I think there were a lot of these coding assistant came into 2023, right? There was this like army of assistant came into picture. If we divide this assistant, there are a lot of assistant like designed specific for specific purpose. There are for designer, there are for DevOps, there are for data science, data engineers, etc. Today, being a developer, backend developer specifically, I'll be using GitHub Copilot as a demonstration tool, and I'll be using Kotlin as a language. How many of you here tried any coding assistant tool before? So many, right? Like Chat GPT, we keep on using it. I think today, instead of going to Google, we just directly go to Chat GPT, we search what we want. That has become our default thing. Uh, so we will just we'll do the demo by using the snapshot itself. So it's easy and deterministic, and you don't get into all those nuances. um, so being in banking domain, I'll be using simple banking kata. It is a simple statement, right? You generate, there is account, and a user wants account statement by filtering withdrawal or deposits happened in the account. Simple statement. Will not be developing entire kata. I will not bore you to develop like entire problem statement. We'll be just using small snippets of it to see how it behaves with my coding assistant. I think given that so many of you have used these AI assistant tool, you know that anything you send to this tool is a prompt, right? Good variable name is a prompt. Testing name is a prompt. You're asking a query, yes, that's an explicit prompt. And there are different ways you can ask for the prompt. I'll quickly share about. Can I? Okay. Okay. So this is my prompt, usual prompt we have seen. This is like inline chart editor. And then there are different commands it provides me, which is like explain, feedback, fix. So you can use these commands to ask for more things. And there is this inline chat. So if let's say I can select this line, and if there is some compilation error, I use different import over here, for example, and I don't know what is wrong, right? So I can just select this and I can use inline chat and say that, hey, fix this for me. So these are capabilities with AI assistant tool. Let me go back to my presentation. So I started with account, right? And started with TDD over here. Even though tool can generate test for me, I believe in writing test first and then writing code for it. So still following old practice of TDD, not going away with that. So I gave a prompt, hey, can you generate setup mock MVC because I know that I want to use mock MVC for this one. And can you help me to come up with a setup for this one? And I want to verify this, and my setup is this. To my surprise, it gave me, not to my surprise, but it gave me correct result for the mock MVC. The code is not visible, is it, from the backside? Or maybe, okay, just trust me on that one when I say that. So it gave me correct result on mock MVC. But when I did the, like, if you see in integration test, there is a Mockito which is being used. If you know end-to-end integration, you don't use any mocks, right? Only external dependencies is something you mock. So this was something wrong, right? Now, why it was wrong? Because I didn't give the complete context. It cannot read my mind that, hey, it has to use account repository. How would it know? Because there was nothing in my repository. And then I gave the correct prompt. So, okay, if you're starting first time, these are some things you need to follow. You need to iterate through it. You need to learn how to give the prompt, and you just don't give it on a first attempt. You might need to learn how to use it. Then I added here account repository. So it knows that I have to use this account repository to verify, and it did that. But again, the assertion was wrong because my account entity didn't exist. But fine, like you can tweak it, right? So the lesson learned over here is don't accept everything that the Copilot gives me as it is. Reiterate on that one. There is human loop that is always needed. Then the next thing was, so it helps you to understand small error typos you will make, and you will face like so many, you will spend so much time in debugging that, and it helped me over there. So I have this account entity, and I got this error that there is something wrong when I run the flyway script during the integration test, right? And the error was, and then it prompted the error. The error is account type should be in snake case. It was in the camel case. So these kind of debugging help was helpful. And then another useful case scenario over here is generate test data builder as per this one, right? So I have one data builder defined as per my standard, and I can say that, hey, can you generate another test builder for me? And it generates it. Again, I cannot accept as it is. I need to check through it is correct or not. But it saves that much of time for me to come up with, like write all the boilerplate code. And because I have successful test, I said that, can you generate bad request test for me? And it generated like account is missing and this is missing. Because this is my like, I'm just doing kata. This is not production code, right? But in production code, I would have expected more error friendly response saying that, hey, this was missing and that was there. But again, it gave me structure. I need to tweak on it to add more response. Another interesting thing, we in our project, right, we do certain things, but we don't do it like always. For example, adding Swagger setup, adding test container setup, adding Kafka setup, and I'll use like Chrome editor, go over their browser and search and then find it out. But being in same editor, it can help me to understand like, hey, my build.gradle file has these dependencies, so it can suggest me the setup for that one. And over here, if you see, there is this new support which has been added by the tool. You can specify the contextual files, and that's something I wanted to show before. So you can add the contextual files, and then you can follow like step by step over here. So it can verify that, hey, your step 1 is done, step 2 is done, and this is where you are missing, etc. The another thing to note down here is this tool, right? Like this assistant, any fine-tuned model has been trained at specific time. So which means, let's say you're using some library which is released after that, you wouldn't get up-to-date result. And that's what happened with me during the Swagger setup. It can understand code smell. I use very simple example. I purposefully didn't add this code to the account service. And then I asked that, hey, can you generate, like, is there any code smell? So it could identify that. Okay, so given that we all know, we've seen, this is where demo ends. We just built account controller with this demo. Okay, so when it works better and when it doesn't work better, we saw that, when there are simple tasks that you need to do, and you know it in theory how you will do it, and you to just generate the boilerplate code, you will use it. Some kind of setup where, you need to do like Swagger configuration, which you do like once in a while, but not always. You don't need to leave the editor, and you can take help of these tools. And of course, how not to get carried away. You can sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't work, right? So you need to understand when it doesn't work. When it doesn't work, call for a human help. This doesn't replace a human pair, right? So call for human help and solve that issue. And sometimes doing it, like, I don't go for everything to like assistant, hey, can you do this for me, do this, do that for me? No, maybe some trivial where templates I have to design, I'll ask for them. But other things you just do it by yourself, because maybe you will do it faster than asking for a prompt and getting response. And what are the capabilities of Copilot? We have seen this already. I'll summarize it again, right? So everything you give is a prompt. Comment, good function name, good variable name, good test name, everything goes as a prompt. So all those clean coding practices that we have been following, that still stays, right? So you need to still, if you use X, it wouldn't understand why you use X in certain context. So you need to remember, I didn't give account repository, so it gave me wrong suggestion. So you need to use correct name. If I would have just used account, it wouldn't have given me correct suggestions. So you need to still use those words and name properly. Remember, it has learned it how to generate this is based on just existing patterns, which means it has scrapped code over GitHub, over other repositories, Stack Overflow, and whatnot. And that's how it can give the suggestion, right? So it is just learning from the pattern. And we saw that there is really good integration with some of the IDs. So if you're using those IDs, you don't have to leave those IDs and you can be just there and ask for the help. Yeah, so some other capabilities, right? So it can handle repetitive tasks. We saw in like test builder case. Treat the code as first draft of the code and not as a final code. And it can only understand it. It only generates the code by learning the pattern, right? What it is not. So given, like, we saw that it helped me to like, there was this error which happened during account entity and account migration circuit, like when we were writing migration. Even though it could understand error and give me what that error meant, but it is not a debugger, it is not a compiler, right? It's just a tool which can understand the pattern, which means it is not always correct. That's something we saw it like very first time. It is definitely not security auditor. And it doesn't always work. So, okay, I think I'll tell you this incident. Like 2 days before, I was playing with CoreLogics and I wanted to build some dashboard. So I went to ChatGPT and I asked for, hey, can you generate this query for me? I used that query, made some tweaks in it, and used it in the CoreLogics Query Explorer. But it didn't work because some of the functions which were suggested by CoreLog, like the ChatGPT, were not available at all. So it hallucinated, right? Because it gave me result from the Splunk and it thought that, oh, the Splunk result should also work in CoreLogics, but it didn't work. So it hallucinates, and that's something we need to understand. There are claims, right? That my, like, these AI assistant tool can build everything like software from end to end. But in today's era, the problems are not simple. The problems are wicked problems, right? They are not simple. Multiple stakeholders are involved. We want to make something fast. We want to make something performant. We want to add some more consistency, make our infra stronger. And sometimes we even want to like explore problem definition because we don't know what problem means, right? And that's how we start project. And in this era, claiming that copilot or AI assistant tool can solve this problem, it cannot, because it cannot understand trade-off. It cannot understand that there are if multiple repositories, which repository should have this responsibility and which shouldn't, and then even if I make this in repository, should I use async communication or sync communication, etc.? It cannot take that decision. The requirements are not simple, and requirements are complex. So we need human being to interpret those requirements, and then maybe at day-to-day coding level tasks, you give those prompts to your tool, and then it can give you response back. So I think the thing I wanted to conclude over here is the claims which we see in the market, which is related to, hey, it can do things end to end. Maybe it could have done that 20 years back when we had just CRUD code, but not today because the problems are not just simple. And this is very important, right? So we are using this to generate to use the, like, how is the quality of the code which is generated by Copilot? What is code quality, by the way? So much silence in the crowd. Spot on. So the code quality is, people say that, hey, if my software works, my code quality is like awesome, but it is not the case, right? uh, code Code quality is different than working code. The code should be easy to read, easy to maintain, and easy to add features on top of that. If you cannot do all that, then it just works, but it is not maybe clean code. And clean source code is equally important as clean test code. So you need to write, like, you need to follow all good coding practices while writing the test as well. So what is the, like, how is the code quality generated by these AI assistant tool? Remember, it learns from the pattern and it takes the context into the picture, right? So if you are owning some legacy repo, it has a bad code, it will learn that, hey, repo has a bad code, so it will learn from that pattern and generate the bad code. And if you're a human being, like, you just go into mode of alt enter, accepting everything, thinking that, hey, Copilot is correct, you will probably end up generating bad code, right? So with the purpose you chose this tool to make your productivity higher, or maybe add good code, and maybe have your story throughput faster, it would not serve that purpose. So remember that these tools cannot differentiate between good code and bad code. They just understand context, they just understand patterns, and from that they will generate the code. The code, also, they have learned it from production as well as non-production code bases, right? So how these tools have built, they have they they have used GitHub code bases, which have been used, some for production, some for non-production. So sometimes, like, for example, my code right now is present on the GitHub. It works, but is it ready for production? No. And that's how it happens, right? So the code which is generated by these tools might not be production ready completely. And of course, like, in which direction your team is headed to, what is your next strategic move, how you want to take decision, what is your incurred tech debt, or like, how you want to design your repository to be, that's something tool doesn't know. So it can give you some suggestion. I just read today morning that there are code which is generated by these tools which is unnecessary. It looks really beautiful. It generates nice DSL and all those things, but it might not be necessary for your use case, right? So you need to, like, even though it works again, and even though how shiny and beautiful looks, it might not be correct in your context. Again, there are some claims. I'm not naming any particular coding assistant tool, and I'm using Copilot and AI assistant tool as an alternative. Okay, so bear with me. If I'm saying Copilot, I means any other AI assistant tool. So there have been claims that if you use a certain tool, your throughput can increase. Does it increase or not? That's something we'll see in a short. But for example, assume that it increases your throughput. But what happens to your next processes and processes before that? Like, can you do analysis faster? Can you ship your code faster? Do you have, like, a proper process set up to review your code? And what happens to your like, other metrics? Is like, is my tech debt going high or low? Do I have, like, less bugs or zero bugs right now? So in all these situations, right, we, like, our engineering practices still matter. So given that this tool has come, it's not a god, right? You need to still adhere to all those basic practices that you need to follow in the project. These are sensible default practices that we follow in Thoughtworks. The core crux of these practices is, each of these practice gives you feedback. Take, for example, TDD, it gives you feedback. It is simple, and anything that you want to repeat, right, you will automate it. So that's how each of these practices lead to these three value. Each of these practices gives you these three values. So there have been talks, like, what happened to these practices now? Like, Are these practices obsolete, or are these practices still matter? So let's see. I think I spoke about this before. I prefer to write tests first and then code first, right? So quality still matters. So if you're using a tool to write test, be aware that, like, have a human loop over there. I wouldn't suggest that. First follow TDD. But let's say in some situation you get a legacy code base, right, where you want to write characterization test, you want to lock the behavior. Yes, I would suggest go for this one, because there you don't have to understand the code, you just want to lock the behavior. At that place, I think this is perfect tool to write test. But where you're writing the application from the scratch and you have the production code, I would say that write test first, and verify that my test assertion is correct or not, because we saw last time that in my demo that the assertion which was generated by the tool wasn't correct. So yes, I think quality is very, very important, given that all these tools started generating the code right now, right? Coming back to, I think I'll just hide that. Yes, somewhere. Oh, it's not. Okay. So the first point is build for production over there. So all these practices, right, like build for production, automated deployment, pipeline, frequent and continuous integration, these again related to how fast you can deploy your code. Does your code give you feedback faster? Can you, like, how quickly you can push your commit to production, and is your repository and setup is ready or not? And that is still true with AI tools. I mean, you will be able to generate code faster, but what happens after that code, you still need that. So I would say that continuous integration, which lead to, like, which include all these practices, are still crucial. Yeah. Okay, this is very interesting. Okay, this context poisoning is we talked about. These are some AI smell, which include some behavioristic smell of, like, behavioristic characteristic smell as well, which is like people characteristic, right? So there is context poisoning. We saw that a AI assistant tool can only generate from the pattern. So if the context is good, it will generate good code. If the context is bad, it will generate bad code. So there is context poisoning that always happens. Then there is automation bias. This is human characteristic. Uh, human A developer thinks that AI is always correct, so it will suggest, it will accept everything which is given by AI. Then there is anchoring effect. This happens with people who have only seen code by these AI assistant tools. So recently, I think decent developers, right, where they are not reading much of the code from the human developer, but they are only reading the code which is generated by these assistants. So they find it very hard to come up with alternative solution for these kind of things. And then there is next level where you go into the steroids. So you just switch off your brain and you just go into like alt enter mode, where you accept everything which is given by the tool. And then the next one is even worse. You have a fear to, you feel very hesitant to delete the code which is generated by the tool. Now you might be thinking that how to overcome this, right? Like how, like you might have faced this. If you have been using tool, you might have fallen into one of these cycles. So how to overcome this then, right? I think that's where human pair comes in. So there are claims again, right? A tool can replace a pair, like a human person. It cannot. So the pair programming practices are still valid along with this tool, because you just added a tool, right? But you haven't replaced a human being. A pair can give you a knowledge, like the project context, the knowledge context. You can practice your other soft skill with that person. It will bring your focus back to the things that you want to do. So I think the claims which are that coding assistant is my pair programmer, it is a tool, but it doesn't replace human being. And our favorite topic of the year, I don't know, does it increase productivity? I think Ankit has spoken a lot on this one, but how does it relevant with AI, right? Any tool which comes in the market, people want to measure it. Like, does it benefit, or does it, like, does it give you benefit, does it not give you benefit, etc. So there are claims again. I'm not going to use any names. There are claims that if you use this tool, you increase your productivity by 55%, right? And then there are claims by the same one that developers only spend 32% of their time in coding. The other time goes into like collaboration, talking to people, understanding problem statement, solutioning, and designing, etc. So where does this 50% boost suddenly comes from, right? Like how do you, like you add suddenly one tool and how do you get so much productivity boost? To tell you truth, you can't. You practically can't, because we know that productivity is not simple, right? There are so many things. It's like a puzzle, like so many things which contributes to productivity. And we already saw in the morning that uh, there is no like single metrics to come up with that. So even if let's say you're using a tool and you're using tool, you finished your story fast, but maybe you're writing test later, right, and not following TDD. So you'll spend your additional time to write the test, right? So it look, even though I think in practicality you have finished your feature, but you're spending time in writing more tests, maybe which is necessary, maybe which is not necessary, but it balances the time, right? So you cannot really, like, one thing leads to another thing. So you cannot really sorry, so you cannot really measure it. And then there are other factors which lead to this one, right? Again, psychological safety, how good your practices are set up, how your existing code is clean, is everyone in the team understand the same domain and the same context, or everyone is going in different tangential direction? Do we have healthy backlog? Are our stories and requirements and tasks defined clearly or not? And all these lead to the productivity, right? I think my fundamental simple things for this one is like follow, this is from Pat Kua's blog. Follow four things, which is link your matrices to goal. Have some goal, right? Like why you want to track something, and then look at the numbers instead of like absolute numbers. Sorry, look at the trends instead of absolute number. Use the shorter tracking period, and if let's say some metrics doesn't work for you, change and iterate over that one. Don't stick to the same one. Yes, this is from again one of the blog of the Thoughtworks, and then it summarizes really well that measure the team effectiveness and not individual performance. Measure outcomes over outputs. Look at the trends that we saw already. And all these measuring effectiveness category, right? There are three things which are going to remain constant always. That coding is not a software fact, like it's not a factory, right? Where you like expect that you add a tool and it will start generating more productivity boost. uh, but I think developer will end up taking more role. Maybe they'll move towards more solutioning, because there are tools you can do more, do other things than just relying on the than just doing the usual coding. And we need to still build this software in human collaboration, right? So that will be still true. And the other thing is, the other which is going to be there is, we want to track everything. Maybe matrices will change over the time. Now it comes to if we add any tool, right, we want to see like how we want to define like ROI for it. I would say that the experience, the software developer experience contributes to these kind of things a lot. So you can first start adopting in your team. If nobody is using it, then it doesn't work. But if people are also, plus take a training, like, and make people aware that how to use it and how not to use it. And then collect the data from people and team, that how is it helping them, like are they able to make is it helping them, are they able to make productive use of it, or it is just going into the waste? So you collect the data about that from the team. Also, on the flip side, right, like you have to have the basic setup ready, which is given that you are using these tools, do you have code coverage and all these setup in place? Do you have quality gates in place? That's something also you need to do along with that one. So it's the similar survey, we had it in Thoughtworks. This is something I took it from Thoughtworks slide. It is available on our page as well. So we tried this tool with 50 projects, 50 production, like live projects where people are actually using it for production code. And the results are good, right? Like the results are satisfactory, which means what we saw before is you adopt, you understand the benefit, if it is helping them or not, by via surveys, right? And this is one of the survey result of that. So does it allow me to work faster? And most of the numbers we see are good. I would like to keep licensees. Yes, that's also like rated higher. This is another one which is Copilot is more distracting than useful to me. Here, I think the shorter number, the better it is, right? Which means it is helpful rather than being more distracting. And how likely you want to recommend, that's like good number over there. So overall, I think the decent experience within Thoughtworks. And then I think this is another like trend which is happening, right? So in 2023, we saw that only AI assistant coding tools started coming into the market. But it is not just limited to coding. You can use AI from your beginning to end cycle. You start with one area, you use it for one team, and then slowly you move to other teams as well if it's successful for you. So yeah, these are takeaways for today's talk. So remember that the AI assistant tool learns from the pattern. It cannot identify between good code or bad code. Remember the AI smells and call for the human if you are stuck at any point in time. It doesn't replace a human pair. Take baby steps. So remember during the demo, I took small baby steps and didn't, even though it can generate like controller service and repository for me, but I didn't do that because we want to avoid the cognitive load of going through this long code base, right? Remember, like, how many of you got like huge MR to review? That's too much to review, right? But rather on the other side, if you receive small MR, it is easier to iterate through. Similarly with this one also, if you're using a tool, you take baby steps and you don't jump on things. And we saw that all engineering practices still matters a lot. Like it doesn't replace any of the practice, rather things matter more. For example, if we consider like quality, it matters these days even more given that tools are generating code for you. And these tools are there just to augment your like capability, right? They doesn't replace you. But at the same time, you don't go into the mode where you do alt enter and accept everything which is given by the tool. At the end, it's from, I think there is going to be separate talk for the ethical AI point of view. But at the end, it's your responsibility that you are pushing this code. So it's a human's responsibility to use it wisely. So that's all. I think I finished it quickly.